Florence, 1519. The city that once birthed the Renaissance now reeks of sweat, wax, and decay. The Arno glitters under a sky of molten gold, but inside the palazzo on Via Larga, the air is thick with incense and fear. A woman lies in labor, her screams echoing through painted halls lined with frescoes of saints who look away. Moments later, a child enters the world, small, blue, silent. The midwife hesitates, certain it's stillborn, until the infant gasps one sharp breath, a sound like defiance. Her name will be Caterina Maria Romola di Lorenzo de Medici. Within 3 weeks, both her parents will be dead. The cradle that rocked under silk will become a coffin of politics. The Medici were Europe's bankers, patrons, and poisoners. Their palaces smelled of myrrh and blood, their prayers mixed with accounting. Catherine's father, Lorenzo II de Medici, Duke of Urbino, was a man born to rule, but destined to die. Syphilis ate his flesh, while he sat in marble baths, pretending to be a Roman god. Her mother, Madeleine Delatour d'Averny, brought a French dowry and a French disease. Catherine never met them. She inherited their debts, their enemies, and their dynasty's curse. The throne of Florence balanced on secrets. Before she can walk, she is property. The Pope himself claims her, Leo Vetz, her great-uncle, whose fingers still smell of gold dust and communion wafers. When he dies, she passes to another Medici, Pontiff, Clement VII, who calls her La mia piccola figlia, my little daughter, and means it politically. Every blessing he gives her is a weapon disguised as affection. At 5 years old, Catherine sits in the Vatican gardens among cardinals debating the color of God's garments. She watches the men's jeweled hands, learning early that faith and finance share the same veins. But the Medici reign in Florence is fragile. In 1527, Rome burns under imperial assault, and the Medici fall with it. Florence declares itself a republic. Papal soldiers die in alleys where painters once sketched angels. The people remember what the Medici cost them. Famine, taxes, betrayal. Catherine, now 8, becomes a symbol of their hatred. She is imprisoned in a convent, a child hostage draped in velvet. The walls echo with psalms sung through clenched teeth. Nuns teach her to sew, to pray, to poison slowly. When the Florentine Republic learns that the Pope wants her alive, they decide she must die. The First Order arrives quietly, remove the Medici child, no blood, no scandal. Catherine is moved from convent to convent, each poorer, colder, more remote. In one, the sisters starve her. In another, soldiers break down the doors, searching for her small body. But the child has already vanished into the cellar, wrapped in a sack of grain. The nuns lie to protect her, whispering to the Virgin for forgiveness. A chronicler writes that she survived by eating candle wax and rodents. Historians dismiss it as exaggeration. But the convent records note missing oil, missing bread, and rats that vanished from their traps. The girl learned early that survival was a religion of its own. By 12, she has witnessed more coups than birthdays. She learns to read men's intentions the way other children read scripture. One glance, one tone, one hesitation. When imperial forces restore Medici power in 1530, the Pope retrieves her like a lost coin. Her first meal in freedom is served on gold, veal, figs, red wine. She eats silently, the way the starving do. When Clement looks at her across the table, he doesn't see a child, he sees leverage. France wants influence in Italy. The Pope needs a marriage to secure it. Catherine will be the bridge, soft flesh, binding empires of steel. The offer arrives from King Francis I of France. His second son, Henry, Duke of Orleans, will take the Florentine orphan as wife. The boy is 14, sullen and silent. The girl is 14, clever and cursed. The wedding contract reads like a treaty. Lands, titles, papal blessings traded as currency. Clement insists the dowry include everything Florence owns that isn't nailed down. If my little Catherine cannot rule Florence, he says, she will rule France. The journey north begins in winter. The procession stretches for miles. Horses, guards, clerics, carrying relics that rattle with each jolt of the carriage. Catherine rides wrapped in crimson, the Medici color, staring through frosted glass at peasants who cross themselves as she passes. In Avignon, they whisper that her eyes are black as ink and just as difficult to erase. When she reaches Marseille, King Francis greets her with pomp that masks pity. She is small, too thin, her face pale beneath, jewels too heavy for her neck. Yet when she bows, the entire French court falls silent. Even then, she understands spectacle. Even then, she knows that survival is theatre. The marriage, in October 1533, is magnificent and mechanical. The Pope himself performs the ceremony, radiant in vestments woven with gold thread from Constantinople. Trumpets echo through the cathedral as incense veils the air. Catherine kneels beside Henry, who barely looks at her. His heart belongs to another Diane de Poitiers, a widow twice her age, whose beauty is marble and poison. Catherine watches the woman from across the nave, studying her poise, her calm, her control. She learns her first royal lesson. Desire is hierarchy, and affection is warfare. The wedding night becomes a diplomatic failure. The sheets remain unstained. The whispers begin before dawn. French courtiers snicker. The Florentine cannot bear fruit. They call her the little Italian merchant's girl. Even servants mimic her accent. Henry avoids her. The court isolates her. But she waits, observing, listening. Catherine de Medici will never be the most beautiful woman in France, but she will be its most informed. When Pope Clement dies months later, her protection collapses. The French whisper that her fortune died with him. King Francis keeps her at court, out of politeness or curiosity. They underestimate her. In a world of silks and swords, she begins to weave invisible threads. Debts owed, favors promised, letters copied in her own hand. Her allies are not princes, but cooks, maids, priests, the ones who watch everything and speak to no one. Years later, these same hands will turn France's fate with a glance from their queen. Florence forgets her, but Catherine never forgets Florence. The city that starved her becomes the phantom that shapes her politics. Every feast she hosts in France carries a hint of Florentine poison, rich, perfumed, and dangerous beneath its surface. Every mass she attends reminds her of those convent walls that smelled of wax and rot. Every royal smile she returns hides calculation sharpened by years of captivity. By 16, she is fluent in the 3 languages that matter most: French, Italian, and fear. The courtiers who once mocked her start to notice her intelligence. She studies astronomy, medicine, alchemy. She walks the palace gardens at midnight, whispering to the statues of gods long dethroned. A lady-in-waiting records that Catherine kept bottles of dark liquids in her chambers and spoke to no one for hours. Rumor calls her witch, history calls her patient. When Francis sends Henry to war, Catherine remains behind, managing correspondence, balancing accounts, soothing tensions between noble families. She does it quietly, unseen, until her influence becomes indispensable. France begins to forget she was ever the unwanted Italian bride. But Catherine doesn't forget anything. Every insult, every humiliation, every hunger will later return, dressed in velvet, crowned with lilies, and holding the keys to France. The year is 1547. King Francis dies. Henry becomes King Henry II of France. And Catherine, the orphan, the hostage, the mocked foreigner, becomes queen. She bows as bells toll across Paris, eyes calm, hands folded. Behind her, Diane de Poitiers stands radiant in diamonds. Catherine smiles at her. She knows what comes next. Paris, 1547. The city smells of wet stone and roses left too long in the sun. Bells toll for the coronation of King Henry II, but it is not the new king who holds the court's breath. It is the queen standing beside him, Catherine de Medici, veiled in gold-threaded black eyes, fixed on the altar, unreadable. Behind her, Diane de Poitiers glows in white satin, her jewels catching the light like shards of judgment. She is 50, yet still the center of Henry's orbit. The courtiers know the hierarchy. Diane commands, Henry obeys, Catherine endures, but endurance has always been her art. She had learned in Florence that survival means waiting while others consume themselves, and so she waits. She smiles at Diane, even curtsies when protocol demands it. The gesture becomes legend, the Florentines' serpent smile. Henry spends nights in Diane's chambers and mornings at her feet in the council room, seeking her counsel as if from scripture. Catherine remains silent, arranging flowers, hosting dinners, appearing pious. But behind that silence, France begins to bend around her invisible hand. Her first ally is not a courtier but an apothecary. René Le Florentin, the perfume maker sent from Italy, brings with him crates of herbs, minerals, and unlabeled vials. The court believes they are for her cosmetics, rosewater, face powders, essences of lavender. They are half right. Some bottles do hold perfumes that make the queen smell of violets and honey. Others contain distilled belladonna, arsenic, mercury, chloride. Renault's workshop becomes a labyrinth of scents where faith and death share the same fragrance. In France, Catherine says, a woman must defend herself with beauty. Her chambers soon smell like heaven and hell, intertwined roses, musk, vinegar of four thieves. Servants report strange rituals. Catherine walking barefoot at midnight among candles, whispering Latin, drawing symbols in ash. Historians debate whether she practiced sorcery or strategy. The evidence is circumstantial. The talismans found among her jewelry, the horoscopes she commissioned for every royal birth, the reports that she refused to dine before consulting the stars. But every court in Europe called her the Italian queen who knew too much. Before we go deeper, if this kind of forbidden history captivates you, subscribe to Whispers of History. Tell me, are you listening in the hush of midnight or beneath the glare of day? Because Catherine's story changes depending on the light you hear it in. Now, let's return to the Louvre. The royal palace hums with intrigue. France is rich but restless, its nobles divided by faith, its treasury drained by endless wars. Henry governs through passion more than reason. Diane manages the symbols of power, architecture, ritual, legacy. Catherine manages what neither of them see, the undercurrents of fear. She builds networks through women, ladies-in-waiting, governesses, widows of courtiers. They trade letters and powders, gossip and omens. No secret leaves the palace without brushing her ears first. When her first child is born, Francis, a fragile boy with feverish skin, the court barely acknowledges it. At least she can breed, Diane says coldly, and Henry laughs. But Catherine bears 10 children in 11 years, each one a potential heir, each one a thread binding her to the throne she cannot yet control. She watches Henry's tenderness toward Diane harden into dependence. Every decree, every military order bears traces of the mistress's will, and so Catherine learns to strike indirectly. She begins with symbols. Diane's initials, D and H, are entwined across palaces, engraved on fountains, embroidered into draperies. One morning, artisans find their chisels replaced, their orders revised. The initials now form a different pattern, an intertwined DH, and see Diane's insignia has become a trinity, with the Queen's initial now impossible to erase without destroying the design. The message is invisible and absolute. Catherine is not gone. She is beneath everything. Her second weapon is knowledge. While Henry rides to war against the Habsburgs, Catherine reads the intercepted letters of his generals. Renault's agents, perfumers, physicians, priests, reports who plots, who cheats, who kneels. She memorizes details, a duke's mistress's name, a bishop's gambling debt, a captain's illegitimate child. When she needs obedience, she doesn't command, she reminds. France begins to learn that the Queen's smile can precede ruin. By the mid-1550s, Catherine's apartments have become laboratories. Alchemists from Florence work beside astrologers from Bologna, their instruments gleaming under candlelight. They chart planetary alignments, distill potions, carve wax effigies of rivals. The court mocks her Italian superstitions until outcomes start to match predictions. A duke who ridiculed her fell from his horse 2 days later, neck broken, tongue protruding like a curse. Another, who refused to repay a debt to the crown, drowned mysteriously in a fountain shaped like Diane's initials. Coincidence? Perhaps. But Catherine's servants begin to whisper that their Queen's prayers are heard by darker saints. In 1559, the court prepares for celebration, the marriage of Catherine's daughter, Elizabeth, to Philip II of Spain. The jousts in Paris are lavish, the streets perfumed, the pavilions embroidered with gold. Henry insists on competing, wearing Diane's colours on his sleeve. The air smells of sweat, horses, and arrogance. Catherine watches from her balcony, her expression marble. When the king lowers his visor, she senses something, an omen, a pattern in the air. Moments later, the lance of Gabriel de Montgomery shatters through Henry's helmet, with splinters pierce his eye. Blood gushes like wine spilled on holy cloth. The scene freezes, the crowd silent, the queen motionless. Henry convulses, eyes rolling toward the sun. He will linger 10 days, delirious, calling for Diane. Catherine never leaves his bedside. She forbids the mistress entry, though Henry begs. He dies with Catherine's rosary pressed against his chest. His last sight, her face calm, unreadable, victorious. France crowns her queen twice, once by marriage, once by blood. Diane de Poitiers is exiled within a week. Her jewels are confiscated, her estates seized. Her signature gardens wilt, untended. Catherine has the same fountains rebuilt in her own name. Yet she spares Diane's life, a mercy that feels more like prolonged punishment. In the following months, Catherine transforms. The quiet girl of Florence becomes the regent of France. Her eldest son, Francis II, is 15, frail, frightened, and ruled by his wife, Mary, Queen of Scots, and her powerful Guise uncles. Catherine watches as the Guises turn the court into their private altar of Catholic ambition. She cannot oppose them openly. Instead, she listens, gathers, waits. At night she walks through the halls of the Louvre, lit by oil lamps that tremble like dying stars. Servants claim she speaks to Henry's ghost. Others swear she consults with Renner in a language no priest would bless. What we do know, letters survive, written in her own hand, coded in astrological symbols, predicting alliances, betrayals, deaths. Some of these predictions come true within weeks. When Francis II dies suddenly in 1560 fever, or poison, or divine retribution, the power vacuum is complete. Catherine becomes regent of France for her 10-year-old son, Charles IX. She is now the mother of kings, the widow of France, and the architect of survival. The courtiers who once mocked her accent bow. The bishops who whispered, which now call her Madame la Reine Mère. But her throne rests on trembling ground. France is tearing itself apart. Catholics and Huguenots, believers and reformers, slaughtering one another in fields and cathedrals. Catherine stands between faiths, her own religion, pragmatic, stability. Better a kingdom of corpses, she writes, than a kingdom of fanatics. From Florence to Paris, from convent to crown, Catherine has mastered the art of waiting. But now waiting will not be enough. She will need to orchestrate faith and fear like an organist playing God's own music. And the music she is about to compose will drench France in blood. Paris, 1560. The city feels different under Catherine's reign, quieter as if holding its breath. The banners of faith hang from every window, crucifixes, psalters, and the new symbol of rebellion, the Huguenot Psalm book. France is split in two. The Catholics claim the old order, the Protestants claim the conscience of man, and between them stands a queen who believes in neither. Catherine de Medici calls herself the guardian of her son's throne, but privately she calls herself the keeper of balance. She will not let faith destroy her dynasty. If France must burn, it will burn on her terms. The boy King Charles IX is 10 years old, pale, intelligent, already haunted. Catherine keeps him close, sleeping in an adjoining room, controlling his tutors, his meals, his dreams. Each morning, she shows him the faces of courtiers who bow to him. Every smile, she tells him, is either a lie or a plea. He believes her. He must. In a court of zealots, Catherine is his only constant. To the Catholics, she is too tolerant. To the Huguenots, too ruthless. To her son, she is both shield and shadow. Her council meetings are theatres of tension. The Guise brothers, Iron Catholics, press for extermination of heretics. The Admiral Coligny, Protestant and idealist, begs for reform. Catherine listens to both, her hands folded, her eyes never blinking. When the guises thunder for blood, she speaks softly, blood calls for blood. How much of France are you willing to drain? When Coligny preaches mercy, she murmurs, mercy feeds ambition. She signs no edict she cannot reverse. She becomes the embodiment of ambiguity, the most dangerous position in politics. Yet ambiguity has a cost. Rumors grow like mold, that she consults demons, that she poisons her rivals, that her black-clad riders visit cemeteries at midnight. The Protestants call her the Italian Jezebel. The Catholics whisper that her tolerance betrays Christ. She replies to neither. Silence, she says, is the weapon of those who intend to outlive their accusers. Before we continue, if you're drawn to this kind of dark history where power wears a rosary and a dagger, subscribe to Whispers of History. Tell me, are you hearing this under candlelight or under the glare of a screen? Because this chapter of history was meant to be whispered, not read aloud. Now, back to the Queen who ruled by balance and shadow. The year is 1562. In the small town of Vassy, the Duke of Guise's men massacre a congregation of Huguenots gathered in prayer. Dozens die, men, women, children. The wars of religion begin, and Catherine's France turns cannibal. Fields fill with corpses, churches become fortresses, preachers carry pistols into pulpits. Catherine rides from city to city, not as ruler, but as mother, mediator, magician. Her entourage includes soldiers, priests, and physicians carrying both cures and poisons. Every negotiation she hosts begins with scripture and ends with veiled threats. Her traveling court becomes infamous. She arrives in blood-soaked towns, dressed in black velvet, carrying no weapon but her voice. Witnesses describe her presence as like an eclipse. She speaks with weary patience, promising peace but never defining it. And somehow, peace comes temporary, fragile, bought with bribes and marriages. When diplomacy fails, she turns to her other arts. René Le Florentin remains her confidant, his perfumes now more potent than ever. Together they craft gifts that kill politely. A pair of gloves lined with arsenic powder for a duchess too outspoken. A poisoned bookbinding for a Protestant envoy. A rosary whose silver beads carry enough mercury to kill a man in prayer. The deaths appear natural, fever, fainting, divine wrath. God chooses strange messengers, Catherine says when questioned. But not all her weapons are chemical. Her architecture becomes psychological warfare. She commissions the Tuileries Palace, a labyrinth of mirrors, hidden chambers, and sightlines designed for observation. Courtiers whisper that its corridors echo when no one walks them. In her private gallery, she places portraits of her enemies, painted, then burned, then repainted again. She watches them until she knows their weaknesses by heart. Every hallway, every staircase is an extension of her mind. Elegant, deceptive, endless. In 1563, Catherine's diplomacy achieves what armies could not, the Edict of Amboise, granting limited freedom to Protestants. The peace is fragile, but for the first time in years, the bells of Paris ring without irony. Catherine breathes, but not easily. She knows peace in France is like perfume, intoxicating, temporary, and one drop too much becomes poison. Charles IX is now 13, restless, fascinated by blood. Catherine sees his father's volatility returning, mixed with her own cunning. To shape him, she stages the Court of Miracles, elaborate entertainments designed to teach politics through theatre. At banquets, she seats enemies beside each other, forcing smiles that hide daggers. In masquerades, she assigns roles, bishops dressed as beggars, generals as servants. Power, she tells her son, is performance. Whoever controls the stage controls the truth. Her sons learn well, too well. Francis is dead, Charles is pliant, and her younger boy, Henry of Anjou, watches everything with the calculating stare of a serpent. Catherine recognizes herself in him and fears it. She keeps him close, but never trusts him. Meanwhile, France's peace unravels again. Protestant iconoclasts desecrate cathedrals. Catholic mobs retaliate with massacres. Catherine's patience thins. She summons astrologers to chart omens, their charts predicting catastrophe. When she dreams of rivers running red, she orders the Tuileries Chapel repainted, from white lilies to crimson roses. Better to decorate blood than to drown in it, she says. 1567, the surprise of Meaux. Protestant rebels attempt to kidnap the royal family. Catherine escapes barefoot through the night, clutching her son's hand, mud streaking her silk gown. She survives, but something in her changes. From that moment, her mercy becomes mathematics. Every betrayal will have a proportional consequence. Every rebellion will be answered with ceremony and slaughter. The following years are a pendulum: peace, massacre, negotiation, betrayal. France becomes a crucible, and Catherine its alchemist. Her correspondence fills with contradictions. Letters to Calvinists begging restraint, letters to bishops urging purges. She keeps both drafts unsigned, to remind herself that belief is a luxury rulers cannot afford. By 1570, the wars have drained France's soul. Bodies rot in fields, coffins rot in churches. Catherine proposes a final solution: peace through marriage. Her daughter, Marguerite de Valois, will wed Henry of Navarre, a Protestant prince. The union will symbolize reconciliation. It will also gather every dangerous man in France within the walls of Paris, and Catherine will hold the key. Historians still argue whether she intended what came next or merely allowed it. But the evidence letters, intercepted orders, sealed chests, suggests calculation, not coincidence. The wedding is set for August 1572. Guests pour into Paris, nobles, preachers, mercenaries, all pretending civility under a sky heavy with heat. Catherine walks through the preparations like a sculptor inspecting a masterpiece. She smiles at the laughter, the music, the prayers. Let them celebrate, she murmurs. The angels can sing later. For 6 days, the city feasts. For one night, it will scream. Paris, August 23rd, 1572. The air is too still. The Seine lies like black glass, reflecting torchlight and treachery. Inside the Louvre, wedding garlands still hang, wilted lilies and roses that reek of perfume and decay. The marriage of Marguerite de Valois and Henry of Navarre has brought together Catholic and Protestant nobility for the first time in a decade. They toast peace, kiss cheeks, and whisper prayers to opposite gods. But beneath the music and laughter, something trembles. A rhythm too slow to be festive, too steady to be innocent. It is the pulse of waiting. Catherine de Medici moves through the corridors in silence, her black silk whispering against stone. She has prayed, planned, and poisoned her way to this moment. Her son, King Charles IX, paces like a caged wolf, young and fevered, haunted by dreams of burning fields. He demands order in his kingdom. She promises to give it order born of blood. Hours earlier, a failed assassination attempt against Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, the Protestant leader, shattered any illusion of peace. He survived barely. His followers scream for justice. His enemies demand vengeance. Catherine knows one truth: if Coligny lives, France dies. The decision takes shape in whispers, then in signatures. At dawn, the bells of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois will toll. It will sound like morning mass. It will mean massacre. She stands at her son's side as he hesitates. "Will God forgive us?" he asks. Catherine touches his cheek. "God forgives kings," she says. "He punishes weakness." Before we continue, if the darker corners of history fascinate you, subscribe to Whispers of History. Tell me, where are you listening from? Is it midnight where you are? Because in Paris it was, and when the bells rang, midnight became eternity. Now, let's return to the city that awoke in screams. The bells begin before dawn. A single chime, then another, echoing across the river like the heartbeat of doom. Doors burst open. Soldiers rush through the narrow streets, their torches devouring the night. The first body falls before the third bell. Coligny is dragged from his bed, his wounds still fresh from the earlier attack. His servants beg for mercy, his killers laugh. A dagger thrust, a window opened, and the admiral's corpse tumbles into the street below. Someone cries, the king commands it, and that lie becomes license. From the Louvre to the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, Paris erupts. The slaughter is intimate. Neighbors murder neighbors, priests bless daggers. Mothers smother children to spare them the blade. The Seine runs thick, black with blood, carrying limbs and lace downstream. Witnesses say the water choked with bodies for days. Church bells ring, not in mourning, but in rhythm, as if the city itself were keeping time with the killing. Catherine watches from her window, the city glowing red beneath her. She does not smile, but she does not turn away. Her ladies-in-waiting weep. She silences them with a glance. France is being purified, she says softly. Let her scream herself clean. Historians debate whether those words were ever spoken, but they appear in 3 independent accounts, written by men who hated her, and none dared invent a lie so believable. Inside the palace, Protestant nobles, the wedding guests pound on locked doors, begging the king's mercy. Catherine orders their names, recorded before she gives the nod. Guards open the doors one by one. Each guest is led to the courtyard under the guise of safety. None return. The cobblestones glisten by dawn. Henry of Navarre, her new son-in-law, is spared barely. Catherine confronts him herself, her gown spattered with the night's work. Convert or die, she says. He kneels, whispers the words she requires, and becomes a Catholic by necessity, a prisoner by grace. Marguerite, his bride, collapses on the marble floor, her wedding dress soaked in blood. She will later write, I woke to the sound of murder and found myself a wife in a tomb. By sunrise, 3,000 Parisians are dead. By the end of the week, the number across France will exceed 10,000. Towns imitate the capital's violence. Rivers carry the dead from Lyon to Rouen. Europe watches in horror, calling it a massacre. Catherine calls it balance. To her, it is arithmetic. Too many swords, too few thrones. Better 1,000 corpses than 1,000 rebels, she tells the council that dares not disagree. Yet even she cannot silence conscience forever. Charles IX, the boy king who ordered the killings at her urging, begins to unravel. He wakes, screaming at night, choking on air. I smell blood, he cries. I see them drowning. His physicians prescribe mercury, prayer, confession. Nothing works. He grows pale, paranoid, haunted by phantoms no one else can see. Servants find him kneeling before his mother's door, whispering, You made me a butcher. She opens the door, strokes his hair, and whispers back, No, my son, I made you a king. Réa, Le Florentin, disappears from court soon after. Some say he fled to Italy, others that Catherine had him silenced. The only man who knew exactly what she mixed that summer. His workshop is sealed. Inside, they find copper molds shaped like lilies, flasks labeled with names, not chemicals. Faith, silence, salvation. In the months following the massacre, Paris grows quieter, but the silence is not peace, it is fear. The smell of blood lingers in the stone. The Huguenot survivors flee across borders, spreading the legend of the Medici Queen, the Black Queen, the Serpent of France. Protestant pamphlets depict her as a witch stirring a cauldron of corpses. Catholic poets call her Mater Dolorosa, Mother of Sorrows. Catherine prefers both titles. They ensure her name is never spoken without trembling. When the Pope in Rome hears of the massacre, he orders a Te Deum sung in celebration. Catherine receives the news with an expression that no one can read. Even heaven understands necessity, she says. Then she orders new gowns made entirely of black silk. From that day forward, she dresses in mourning, not for her victims, but for the illusion of innocence she no longer needs. Charles IX dies 2 years later, coughing blood, convinced the ghosts of the slain are at his bedside. His final words, overheard by servants, are chilling. Mother, save me from what we've done. She closes his eyes herself. France crowns her next son, Henry III, a man as vain as he is volatile. Catherine remains regent in all but name, the grey centre of a blackened court, and yet her power feels hollow. The more blood she spills, the less control she keeps. The wars continue, each generation repeating the sins of the last. She sees her family crumbling, her children dying, her alliances rotting. But the queen who once ruled through faith and blood still believes in only one constant, the will to survive. The night of St. Bartholomew will define her forever. To her enemies, she is a monster. To her allies, a savior. But in her private diary, one line appears, written in her own trembling hand. History will call me cruel. Let it. Mercy is for those who have no kingdoms to keep. The bells that had begun the massacre toll again years later. For her son's coronation, for her enemies' funerals, for her own sleepless repentance. Each ring sounds identical. In Paris, sound and sin are eternal. Blois, winter of 1588. The river Loire flows sluggish beneath a sky the color of steel. The palace is silent except for the echo of footsteps and the faint rustle of banners stirred by draught. Catherine de Medici, now 70, moves slowly through the corridors she once commanded like a battlefield. Her hands are veined, her breath thin, but her eyes remain the same, black, sharp, calculating. Around her, France decays. Her sons are kings and corpses in equal measure. Her enemies are priests dressed as courtiers, and courtiers dressed as saints. Yet she walks as if the kingdom still beats to her pulse. She wears mourning still, not as costume, but as armor. Every day she receives petitions, spies, reports, confessions. She no longer signs her letters, Catherine, Queen of France, but simply La Mère, the mother of kings, of ruin, of survival. The wars of religion rage on, and her authority is once again the bridge across fire. But bridges, she knows, burn eventually. Her latest struggle is with her own son, King Henry III, once beautiful, now exhausted. He drifts between piety and paranoia. His favorite monks whisper prophecies, his soldiers mutter rebellion. The Duke of Guise, hero of the Catholic League, has become more adored than the king himself. The people cry Guise in the streets as if it were a prayer. Catherine warns her son that admiration is the most elegant form of treason. He nods, smiles, and does nothing, so she plans again. Before we continue, if this final chapter of Catherine's reign grips you, subscribe to Whispers of History. Tell me, where are you listening from? Is it dawn where you are, or deep night? Because the Queen's story ends in both, a sunrise of peace built upon the ashes of everything she loved. Now, let's return to Blois. December 23rd, 1588. The court gathers for council. The Duke of Guise strides through the halls in white velvet, confident, radiant to radiant. Catherine watches from her chair by the fire, her face unreadable. She knows what her son has decided. The doors close. Within minutes, steel flashes. Guise collapses, his blood soaking into the floorboards. Catherine doesn't rise, doesn't flinch. She only murmurs, too late, but necessary. They say when Henry III came to tell her of the deed, she looked up slowly and said, "You have cut your own hands, my son. France will bleed through them." She was right. The assassination ignites chaos. The Catholic League brands the king a heretic. Paris revolts. Once again, Catherine becomes negotiator between the living and the damned. But her body is failing. The woman who survived sieges, births, and betrayals now survives on will alone. She spends her final months at Blois, the air heavy with incense and damp. Servants claim she talks to ghosts, her husband, her sons, her enemies. "I do not fear them," she says. We are all history now. Letters from her correspondence still arrive, coded, precise, written in a hand that trembles. To one ally she writes, "I have loved France more than God has, for he lets her destroy herself." Henry III visits her rarely, ashamed or afraid. When he does, she reminds him of the truth she once whispered to his brother. Kings are only men until the moment they act like gods. He kisses her hand, then retreats into prayer and paranoia. Within a year, he will be dead, stabbed by a fanatic monk. But Catherine will not live to see it. In January 1589, the Queen's health collapses. Pneumonia, perhaps, or exhaustion in physical form. The court physicians surround her bed, their faces pale beneath powdered wigs. She waves them away. "No more elixirs," she says. "Renee made better ones." She laughs once, a dry, papery sound that fills the room like incense. The end is slow, lucid. She dictates her will, naming debts, dowries, and the souls she still owns through blackmail and gratitude. Her confessor begs her to repent. Catherine turns her gaze to the crucifix. "I have confessed my whole life," she says. "Every act of mine was confession written in blood and ink." Her breath rattles. "If God reads history, he already knows my sins." Historians record that she died at dawn on January 5, 1589. The sky over Blois turned pink as if washed in diluted wine. Her servants covered every mirror in the palace, a Florentine custom not to trap her soul, but to keep it from returning. She was buried beside her husband at St. Denis, though their tomb was later desecrated in the revolutions to come. Her bones, like her legacy, were scattered. What remains is not peace, but paradox. Catherine de Medici ruled for nearly 30 years without a crown of her own. She outlived enemies, outlasted kings, and remade France in the image of her will. Pragmatic, divided, magnificent, and cruel. To some, she was the mother of massacres. To others, the architect of survival. She turned faith into politics, love into leverage, motherhood into monarchy. And like Florence, the city that birthed her, she disguised power as art. Even now, her shadow lingers in France's memory. The palaces she built, the Tuileries Chenonceau, Blois still echo her contradictions. Beauty masking brutality, devotion cloaking deceit. Walk their corridors, and you can almost hear her heels on the stone, her voice whispering across centuries. The throne is not a seat, it is a wound that never closes. In portraits painted after her death, she is always in Black Widow, Mother, Queen, Phantom. But look closer, and you'll see her eyes still alive, glinting with something between pity and amusement. She doesn't look defeated. She looks as though she knows something you don't. Catherine de Medici didn't merely survive history, she wrote it in invisible ink that only blood can reveal. She didn't just wear mourning, she became it. If this glimpse into history's hidden darkness intrigued you, another secret awaits. Click the next story appearing on your screen to continue our journey through time. And remember to subscribe to Whispers of History, because the past still whispers if you know how to listen.